United Church of Christ for a very special evening event, a very special guy. And I'm going to ask the pastor to lead us in a song and a prayer, and then I'll do the introduction.
Why don't we begin with the one we often use for our invocation, Spirit of the Living God. Okay? I'll sing it through once myself, for those of you that don't know it, and then I'll invite you to join me a second time. We'll just do this. Acapulco, as they say. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Melt me, mold me, fill me, use me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Melt me, mold me, fill me, use me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Living God, in your name we gather here this evening. We gather here as your people. We gather here for the sake of life, for the sake of love, for the sake of all you have called us to be. Bless now, in a particular way, and guide Rocky's words, Dr. Carrie Lason's words, that they may touch us and lead us as you would have us to be led. In your many names we pray. Amen.
First, a little commercial. I'd like to tell you what Faith Conversations is about. It's a rather new thing in this church. It's on the website, and I put it together in words for you this evening. I'll read it for you. Faith Conversations is offered at this church on the first and third Tuesday of each month. We start at 7 with the expectation that each session will probably last about an hour, but we adjust that from time to time. This new formational program at Community has been redesigned and renamed. The development team has moved forward with a very positive effort to offer a powerful ministry for the church and the community. We're pleased that we will be able to bring opportunities for members and non-members to grasp God in a new light and find ways to bring this power, this glory, and this joy into focus into our lives. The Christian Education Committee introduced the program now using the name Faith Conversations. We feel it should appeal to those already steeped in the church and religion. Even more, it should also have attraction to those wary of religion, as they now know it, but who are open to the sense of need within their daily lives. Our goal is not to challenge the comfortable or the confident, but rather to comfort those challenged by their present understanding of God and the Bible. For the next few months, we plan to use this material offered by Marcus Borg in his book, The Heart of Christianity, as the basis for our discussions. And we will be exploring what he calls the emerging paradigm of Christianity. Many people have discovered a renewed relationship with the Lord as a result of Borg's work. And now to Rocky. I guess you would think I should be kind and generous and sweet and nice to him, but that would upset him too much because he knows me too well. Right, Rocky?
Right, Bruce.
Okay. I have only a few regrets with Rocky, and that's the fact that I've known him for such a short period of time. Actually, it's only a couple of years ago that he caught me stealing tomatoes in his garden. And that's, when you do that to an Italian who likes to cook, it's tough. Because he wasn't very kind. Actually, he was. He was very generous, and he said, go ahead, steal some more. The other regret I have is that over this short period of time, I've worked so hard to learn to spell his name. And now he tells me he may not be hanging around that long for me to get to write it very often. This is a guy who's loved, and loved by so many people, but he's lived a life that's sometimes been a struggle. It was a struggle until just a few years ago when he met a lovely lady, got a nice home, they're married, they're comfortable, and then this thing hit him. Together, Rocky and I sit and we talk. Together, Rocky and I sit and we cry. Please, as we have our discussion this evening, forgive the tears, because they're part of life. And nothing could give me a greater honor than to say, here's my friend, Rocky Curiosa.
Thank you, Bruce. I guess I'll preface my remarks by two things. The first being that I've made no notes, thought about what I might want to say, but I wanted to speak from my heart, not from a series of notes on my mind. The second is, as we get old, we get emotionally labile. We have mood swings, we cry at the drop of a hat. At a commercial showing a dog being abused. If we get old and we become ill, we become more emotional. And if we become old and we become ill, and we know we have a finite period of time to live, we're off the scale. I guess that's probably where I'm approaching at this point. But please don't be uncomfortable. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm come to terms with this. As my younger son, Michael, said when he was a baby, I will be all right. And so I will be all right. I'd like to give you a snapshot of the last 10 years of my life. In the year 2000, I got divorced. It was not a good thing, but it was the right thing. In 2001, I retired from 30 years of practicing internal medicine at the Reading Hospital. Thank God I did. It gave me a number of years to enjoy. I learned to play golf for the first time, which I guess is a mixed blessing. I started a vineyard with a former friend, which was crazy. We plowed virgin land and worked like the devil, a 65 and a 66-year-old starting a vineyard from scratch. And then in the year 2006, in November, I met a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, wonderful woman with a Spanish name who claimed to be a full-blooded Italian. I didn't ask for papers or birth certificates, but indeed, it was a turning point in my life. We were together and dated for a wonderful December of 2007, we got engaged, and in May the 10th of 2008, we got married. We sold our homes, our individual homes, bought a new home. I was living in Exeter, Pennsylvania Avenue, and we moved right around the corner to Kinsey Hill Drive. She moved a little further from Skipback to here, but the home was her choice. She fell in love with this home. And we set upon remodeling this wonderful home. And we got it after much aggravation with the remodeler, just the way we wanted it by December of 2008. And then in January of 2009, this last January, a year ago, I started having pain in the pit of my stomach. Being a doctor and a fool for a patient, I took care of myself for a month or two, and it wasn't getting better. And I found at the same time my blood pressure was high. So I went to a former partner of mine while I was in practice, Dr. George Jenks. And we did some preliminary tests. We were both convinced it had to be gallbladder or stomach or something like that. And we did tests. And the tests were initially all negative, and I thought I was a crock. I thought I was a nutty patient, but I still had pain. And so we sent me to a gastroenterologist, and he did an endoscopy, and he found that I had some inflammation in my esophagus and stomach. And we said, aha, that's what it is. I said to him during the gastroscopy, I said, there's no cancer? He said, no cancer at all. I said, wonderful. You really fooled me. I thought it was something more serious. So we altered the medication, and then things were not getting any better. So I went back to George Jenks in June and said, George, there's something else going on. We have to do more tests. So we got a CAT scan of the abdomen. And in the middle of June, there it was on the CAT scan, diagnostic of a adenocancer of the pancreas. We spent the next couple of weeks seeing an oncologist, Dr. Nick Leisure, and a radiology oncologist, Dr. Michael Hawes, both of them the heads of their departments. And we started chemo and radiation therapy during the summer of 2009. Completed that course and just recently started a second course of chemotherapy. And that's where my illness began and is at the present time. Since January of 2009, I've had discomfort every day, not been able to take any of the wine that I made, or Bruce made, or eat with savor the foods that I've always enjoyed. But it's all right, because everybody suffers. Jesus suffered. And I offer that suffering to him. Let me take you back to spring again of 2009. Because I was divorced, I didn't know how the Catholic Church would accept me. Both Juanita and I were born and raised Catholic and longed to continue to be Catholic. We would go to St. Catherine's kind of as freeloaders, not paying dues, but enjoying the Mass, which we were comfortable with, because that's the way we were born and raised. And one day, soon after Father Monsignor Doman came, there was a short blip in the church bulletin. It said, St. Catherine of Siena Parish welcomes you, whether you're an inactive Catholic, an active Catholic, no matter what your marital status is, basically no matter what, we welcome you with open arms. Come see us. We both looked at it and said, surely they're talking to us. So, we took him at his word. One day after Mass, we went and we met with Monsignor Doman and spilled the beans, told him everything. And true to his word, he welcomed us with open arms, which was a great joy to us. So we became members of St. Catherine of Siena's parish and have enjoyed and relished these last 9 months or so that we've been there. In June, a new priest came to St. Catherine's of Siena. He was recently ordained. Actually, this was going to be his first Mass and homily that he was going to give. He's younger than any of my sons. He's 27 years old. And we happened to hit his Mass. And Father Gene Ritz is his name. So we sat through the beginning of the Mass and the Gospel, and then the sermon came. And he got up on the pulpit and said, a group of seminarians and I went to Cancun. We got a great deal, very cheap, and it was like 12 of us. And one day, a couple of us went paddle boat. We went to Acapulco. I said Cancun, but I think it was Acapulco. And he said, we went paddle boating, and we got pretty far out. I had a defective paddle boat, and it filled up with water behind the back of the paddle boat. And as it filled with water, it became unstable, and it flipped back. And as it flipped back, I hit my foot on the top, and I started bleeding. And I couldn't right the boat because it was filled with water. And my friends wanted to help me, and I said, you can't help me. They're all in paddle boats. Go get help. So there I was in the water, he said. Warm water, bleeding, shark-infested water. And I was sure I was going to die. And he said, Lord, why? Why would you let me go through all of this seminarian thing, and just when I'm ready to go out and do your work, you take me this year? He was sure he was going to die. Well, he didn't die. The rescue boat came out, picked him up, and he made it safely back to shore. He related this incident to a particular story in the Bible of Jesus taking his disciples out in the boat to fish. And a storm came up, and Jesus was asleep in the boat. And the disciples feared for their life. They were sure that the boat was going to upturn. They were going to drown. They were far enough away from shore. And so they woke the Lord up. They woke Jesus up and said, save me, save me. And Jesus, I get the impression, was a little bit annoyed and said to them, "Why are you afraid? Don't you trust me?" And so he calmed the waters. And they made it back safely too. And the message was acceptance of what the situation is, and faith that God will do what is necessary to carry you through. Now, at that point, I was convinced that Father Ritz was not talking to the congregation. He was talking to me, only me. So, the next week, not because we looked in the bulletin, but we just happened to hit his Mass the second time in a row, which I think was providence again. And his homily this time was of the lady who was along the road as Jesus was walking to a certain city to heal the sick. And the lady said, "If I but touch his robe, I will be healed." And he walks down the road, and he feels a tug on his robe. And he looks down at her and says just a few words, says, "Fear not, your faith has saved you, you will be healed," or something to that effect. And indeed she was healed. Well, now I was convinced. He's talking to me, he's not talking to the church. God has sent this priest for me. So at the end of the Mass, I went up to him in the vestibule, and I said, "Father Gene," I said, "I would like to know you better, and I would like for you to know me better." I said, "I'm going to ask you to come to my house and go out to dinner with me and my wife, Juanita. But I'm not going to ask you for 2 weeks, so that if you want to think of an excuse why you don't want to come, you can do that." And true to my word, 2 weeks later, I called him, and he did accept, and he came to my house. And I said to him, when he was there, over a drink that he had, I had bottled water, that I had cancer of the pancreas, that my time was fairly limited, not years, but maybe a year or two, and that I would probably be having the memorial Mass, and that was it. And that too many times I would go to memorial Masses, and the pastor or priest or reverend would say some generic thing about the person. Why? Because he didn't know the person. I said, "I want you to know me, and I want to know you." And so we have developed a very warm relationship, Father Gene and I. I've met his parents. He's taken me to St. Charles Seminary to listen to the seminarians chant and sing. And it's been a very comforting thing. And he's come over to my house and drinks all my Jack Daniels bourbon. And I envy him because I love Jack Daniels bourbon, but I can't drink it anymore. And that has been very consoling to me too. As has been my friend Bruce, who, as he said earlier, has been a true friend, who has come, who has consoled me, who I know loves me, and who I love. And so that's my story. It has impacted upon me. I have lived my last 9 months with acceptance that this is what I have. Nobody gave it to me. It's just a bodily function. I have faith that God will do what is necessary, has done, not will do, has done what is necessary to carry me through. I don't know what I would have done if he hadn't brought Juanita into my life. She's my blessing. She, I don't know why, feels the same way about me into her life. We both prayed, interestingly enough, for several years before we met. I said, Lord, if I'm finished here, take me. My kids are grown. I've seen my grandkids. I've had my profession. If there's nothing more for me to do, take me. And if not, show me what I must do. And one other prayer I had was, Lord, I long to love somebody with a love I know I have. And I want that person to love me the same way. Interestingly, Bonita says she has had very similar prayers for a couple of years prior to us meeting. And we both feel very strongly that the good Lord has brought the two of us together in a love that I've never known before, in a home that I've never felt so warm in before. As I said during our wedding, when I was in the autumn of my life and I thought I had nothing more but the winter to look forward to, a love as warm as spring came. And that's my story. And now I will open whatever questions you might have of how this malady came into my life and how it has affected me, and whatever questions you may have of me.
First, I'd like to tell a story. Funny, because
Bruce, use the mic.
there's no way, okay. I'm not kissing you. Thank God. There's no way, there's no way that this match could have been made, but we're doing a process here at our church called the engagement process, and part of that is a survey. It's a Gallup survey to determine the individual's strengths. And one of the strengths that people have, and each member of the consistory has already taken it, and we've shared some information, one of the strengths is connectedness. And there are several of us that have that strength. Connectedness is a sense that we all belong to something bigger than ourselves, that there is some binding force that keeps us all together. My daughter back here is strong in that sense of understanding connectedness. And then I hear Rocky telling a story about Father Gene Ritz, going to Acapulco, going out in the water, starting to bleed in shark country, and thinking his life is about to end. Years ago, my first wife and I went to Acapulco. I went swimming, not knowing I was in shark country, but finding that out. Went too far out, I was alone. My wife couldn't swim. A manta ray hit my foot, and I started to bleed. And I'm out in shark water alone, thinking to myself, I think I'm dead. I made it back as Father Gene did, but there's a parallel, a connection, Rocky, with your story that it's almost unbelievable. And I would ask the first question, and we're going to open it for everyone to ask a question or all the questions you want, but that moment, Rocky, when you received the diagnosis
that you knew impacted you, your life, what was your reaction? How did you deal with it at that moment? Because you've dealt with it so well ever since. But could you share that with us?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Number one, having been a physician all my life, I knew that I was a dead man walking. I know that 5% of people with pancreatic cancer live 5 years, and the average is maybe 2.5 years. Thank you. So when Dr. Jenks called me, I had the CAT scan done on Friday. When he called me on Monday, I already knew because being a doctor, I talked to the technician and he wouldn't tell me the diagnosis, but I could tell by his fudging that there was something seriously wrong with the pancreas, and there was only one thing I could think of, and that was cancer of the pancreas. So I was expecting it, and he confirmed it on that Monday in June. June, I think it was somewhere around the 14th, 15th. And I looked at Juanita and I said, we have to prepare. And she said, no, we're going to get a miracle. We're going to go to this university. We're going to go to that university. I said, no. I said, we're going to prepare. Because I know what the odds and the statistics are, and I know, wow, God is gracious and good, that miracles are few and far between, and that being a type A, obsessive-compulsive, practical person that I am, which is the only way I could become a physician, I knew I had to prepare. I asked Bruce a question that I knew the answer for myself, but I was curious to see his answer, and that is, if an angel came down to each and every one of you and said, you have 2 ways of dying. I can give you a good death. You go to bed, you die, you don't wake up the next morning. Or I can give you a warning that you're going to die in a year or 2 years from now, so that you can prepare whatever worldly things you want to prepare. Who among you would take the good death, knowing that it would be probably devastating on those people you left behind? And who among of you would take the year or 2 years, knowing that you would be in pain and suffering for that 2 years? I had no hesitation. I took the year or 2 years. I knew there were things that I had to do, that I wanted to do for Juanita, my wife, to get her in a situation where I felt comfortable, if I had to leave her, that she would be all right. So, it goes back to acceptance and faith. I'll answer any other questions. Anybody has them?
I have one more. People pray for you. And that happens, you've been on our prayer list here in the church for a long time. What would you want us to pray? What would you ask us for?
The question, in case you didn't hear it, as Bruce said, people pray for me. I'm on your prayer list. What exactly would you like people to pray for you, Rocky? I would ask not that you pray for a miracle, not that I be cured. That's in God's hands. If He wants to use me as a miracle, let Him do it. I would want your prayers to say, try and give Rocky
that quality of life between now and the time I go to your house, Lord, so that I can enjoy whatever brief time I have in loving relationship with my wife and friendly relationship with all my loving friends, so that I can be comfortable enough. I would pray that you say, give Rocky the dignity to die, not making his friends uncomfortable, but making his friends say, I hope I can do that. I hope I have the testicular fortitude to do that. Don't let Bruce hog up all the questions.
I have just a comment, Rob.
Yes,
Not
George.
necessarily a question.
Yeah,
I only got to know you, what, a year and a half ago? About that.
about that.
Before your diagnosis. And in a men's retreat, which some of you may or may not know about, this is men's retreat. You are an example and easily warmed to. There was just a good feeling at that time that we knew each other. And I think your gift is that you accept others well. And I would wish for you in this process that all of us have, except you know more finitely when your death comes to a fruition. I would want you to hold yourself in the same love that you hold everybody else. Because I think you are a gift to us.
I won't repeat what he said because I'll cry. But I will tell you that I've tried to live my life with the golden rule. I really have. I came from not very poor, but medium poor parents. They both graduated from the 3rd grade. And I've been gifted with incredibly loving and generous parents. I've always wanted to treat people, whether they were the presidents of mega corporations that I took care of, or whether they were the garbage can collector that I took care of, in the same manner. And I was comfortable with both types of people because of my upbringing and where I had finally landed. And don't feel bad for me. I had 69 and a half years of incredibly good health. I mean, I was like a bull in the china closet. When we moved to our new house, Juanita was hitting me with a yardstick saying, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. And I said, go away, woman, this is man's work, you know. And I was working like a 50-year-old at the time. And so I had glorious 69 and a half years of wonderful health, never having missed a day of work or school or anything since I was in high school, not one sick day. So I was far more fortunate than the vast majority of people, and the Lord blessed me in that way. So it's just my time. So that gift is as much a repayment of what God has given me as it is something de novo from me. Barbara.
I think I'm going to speak from another end of your life. I know these are a lot of friends that you know. Yeah. There are some of us here from the 50s. We know you. You were a wonderful person then. You know, the 50s had a lot of crazies, a lot of sarcasm. Rocky has been a gentleman since the day I ever met him, the day I ever knew you. He's president of our high school class, so you know 500 and some people. You know what people thought of him. I know patience of yours. I have nothing but wonderful things to say. So there's so many parts of your life that you've had people love you and care about you. So I thank you for the years that we knew you. And just wish you comfort.
You're very kind, Barbara. And I truly appreciate all the kind words you've just spoken.
Thank you. It's been a great guy.
Yes.
I'm an artist, and I was commissioned by the Reading Hospital to do a mosaic several years ago in the infusion room at Reading Hospital. And that's where people receive chemotherapy for cancer. And so when I received this award, I had to think about, I thought a lot about what would it be like to be told you have cancer? Because I had to portray something for these people to look at, and I wanted it to have a sense of peace. And I thought that a person who's diagnosed with cancer, it first of all must take your breath away. And then I thought, I imagine that you want time to stop. You know, if time could stop, and you've mentioned the word time several times as you've been talking. And so what finally emerged, and I guess, I don't know if you've ever seen the piece, but I guess is that I tried to draw in rock and stone and tile to portray wind as it blows, but at the same time so that it can go slowly, but it also moves into being rapid, and you can't stop it. And although you want time to stop, can you slow it down? And is there some type of a connection with time? Like, is some of your life now in slow motion and a little bit, I imagine, more precious, and your moments are more meaningful? And this is what I kept thinking about, and I guess I want to know if I just got it right.
Yeah, time is an important part of it, and you're right. We cherish every day and every moment. Obviously, I look at people who on television, I look at people in restaurants, people who come to my house who drink a glass of bourbon or drink a glass of wine, or when we're at a restaurant, people who are eating a meal, and I say, do you have any concept of what a wonderful thing you're doing, and how wonderful it is for you to enjoy that drink or that meal that you're having, to be able to eat it and know you're not going to have pain after you have that. The first thing you do the first thing I did when I had the diagnosis of cancer was to just reflect on my life briefly, matter of seconds, knowing it was over, accepting it, asking God to give me the strength, asking the Holy Spirit to give me the strength to portray this to my wife and my children, my two wonderful sons and their wonderful wives and families. And once you have the acceptance of my husband, my father has a terminal disease and he's going to die, the faith to carry it through. And then it's a matter of letting go, of releasing, saying, okay, I know what I have, I know what I'm going through, I have the faith, Lord, that you're going to carry me through this. My job is done, now it's up to you. You guide me through this, you help me. And indeed, on the days in the past 9 months when I've had my most severe pains, when I've had to go down into my finished basement, kneel at the couch because of the pain, and pray, I would say, Lord, either help me with this pain or take me. Don't let me suffer like this. And by the next morning, it was much better. And I said, it's not my time. And I would be better for a period of time. So, time moves much more slowly. Not because it's moving more slowly, but you, as an individual, stop. You look, you appreciate, you love, you understand. I hope I answered part of your question.
Thank you.
Yes?
Rocky, is your bucket list complete?
My bucket list. I don't know if you are familiar with what he is saying, but Jack Nicholson and Samuel Jackson had a wonderful movie not too long ago. It's called The Bucket List of Things He Wanted to Do Before He Died. I don't know if I'm trying to pull a fast one on the Lord, but I had a humongous bucket list when I started this back in June. My one son, Christopher, I told him, I got the diagnosis on a Monday. That Friday, I told my son, Christopher, and the Monday after that Friday, or 3 days later, or basically a week after I found out my diagnosis, he moved from 35 minutes away from me in Phoenixville to 10 hours away from me in North Carolina to accept a position. Yeah. And his wife, God bless her, his wife I consider my daughter that I never had, were devastated. But I had to tell him. I couldn't let him go down there. And I started with my bucket list. Started calling the bank and my insurance companies, my attorney. I got a gutter helmet put on my roof. Type A, obsessive compulsive. My water heater started leaking. I got a new water heater. I had a list that I made up for Juanita. And the reason I think I'm scamming my Lord is that it seems that just when I think I have my bucket list complete and the good Lord could take me, I think of some more time that I need to do something more. Now my next thing is we're living in our house for 14 years and the water pressure went down last week, and I said, I think we're on well water, and I said, I think I need a new pump, and I said, well, Lord, if it's still low on Monday, then I have to call him now. I was going to do this in spring anyway, figuring I would live at least until spring, and lo and behold, Juanita yesterday said, Hun, the water pressure's back. It's working fine again. Maybe I can wait till spring. Maybe the Lord's going to give me till spring. So I dumped that back into the bucket list. But yeah, my bucket list is, I would say, 95% complete. And but I always hold out one or two things in case he gives me just that extra little time.
Have you found moments of God's sense of humor through this?
I find God's sense of humor in everything. I find God's sense of humor in Bruce.
I know Bruce.
I won't go there, George. I find God's sense of humor in Father Gene. I especially find God's sense of humor in Juanita. We have never laughed so much or cried so much as in the past 9 months. We talk to each other in Italian phrases, and we joke and we kid and I tease unmercifully, and she loves me and I laugh. And God is good.
What makes a better wine?
We know when Randy Pausch was given the same diagnosis as you, he was a young man with young children, and people said, wow, you're really handling this well. And he said, well, I can either fall apart, or shortly my family will be falling on a cliff, and I will not be there to catch them. So I am making nets. And it sounds like you're making nets for Juanita. How are you doing preparing your children?
Thank you for asking the question, Kathy. I have a son in Harrisburg. My sons and I have never been as close as we have in the past 8, 9 years. When there is not discord in the house, you can form the appropriate relationships. And my sons have grown just incredibly close to me, and I to them. My son in Harrisburg is my youngest son, Michael. He calls me every 2-3 times a week. He wants to come up every week, and I say, no, you don't have to come up every week. He wants to do this, do that, and so forth. He's handling it well. He and I cry a lot. His wife, Amy, is a wonderful person. He has twins, a boy and a girl twins, that are 3.5 years old. And that relationship is good. My older son, my firstborn son, Christopher, whose real name is Frank Christopher Curulason, after my father, who just moved to North Carolina. He's the assistant headmaster at Christ Episcopal School, private school in Arden, North Carolina, near Asheville. He is a very special son of mine. He probably embodies my sense of virtues, ethics, morals, more than any of my children. His wife, Andrea, is a type A obsessive-compulsive woman who I've known since she's been 18 years old. I've been her surrogate father. She's been estranged from her father since she was 18. And I don't call her my daughter-in-law, I call her my daughter, and she calls me dad. I have 3 grandsons with them. Their firstborn is Rocco. The middle child is Christian, and the youngest one, who is a real pistol, is Andrew. Andrew, when he was 2, got a splinter in his finger, and he was crying and wouldn't let his mother touch him. And he says, they call me Oompa because Rocco couldn't say grandpa. So he said, let Oompa take a look at it. He's a doctor. And so Andrew sat on my lap and said, Oompa, he said, are you a doctor? And I said, yes, Andrew, I'm a doctor. More tears, looked up at me, he says, a real doctor? And that's the way he's been ever since. They are now 6, 9, and 10. I love them all beyond means. Christopher is a very sensitive, caring person who will do incredibly well. Andrea, his wife, that tells you how I feel about her. She is so special. Yeah, I love her.
Do the boys know that you're sick?
The You mean
The
my
little-
grandchildren?
Yeah. It's not just great hands.
I don't know. I asked them not to say anything in June when I found out. Because there's no reason for them to languish with this longer than they have to. And so far, they can't see the deterioration. I've lost 40 pounds since I made this diagnosis. They can't see what I have. I guess I've been somewhat blessed or something with the fact people say, "Oh, you look terrific. Oh, I can't believe you're so sick." And I say, my answer is, well, I'm going to have to go back to my medical books and says what looks good but feels bad, you know.
Rewrite the book.
Yeah. So I did give each of my two sons a book that I got at a funeral home dealing with death in children. Of course, the 3-year-olds, there's no need for them. But especially Rocco, my namesake, he's 10 years old now. It's June he'll be 11. He'll be aware of who I was and what I was. And my hope would be that they would wait until there would be physical signs of deterioration before they would bring up the subject.
Rocky, first a comment. I first met you when you were thinking about DeMolay, and I met your parents at the same time, and I would only say that you had very rich parents. The question is, how has your profession in any way helped you to come to where you are today as a result of your diagnosis or not? Or has been an impediment?
Well, I might argue with you as far as having rich parents. I was very rich to have the parents I had. God, did I realize that as I went through life and saw other people who had parents that were not nearly as loving and giving and generous as my parents were. My dad and mother with third grade educations had more common sense, more love, and more generosity than so many CEOs that I've come to know.
Well, that's what I meant by rich. That was obvious to me in the first 2 or 3 minutes that I met them.
Yeah, well, that's very kind. And I've been eternally grateful, and I prayed to God in thanks ever since. They're gone now for 15 or more years, and I still pray whenever I pray for their souls. How has being a doctor impacted on my diagnosis? Knowing what I have, not trying to reach for straws that are not there, being a pragmatist, being realistic in what I know I have and what I know I must do. I think it's given me the strength. Arguing with my wife, Dr. Wana, who says you should take more pain medication, you should be more comfortable, you should be more this, you should be more that, which she does out of love. And then I say, let me see your degree. And then she gives me the tongue. Yes.
Hi, my name is Sharon. I'm sure you wouldn't remember me, but I used to work at the Reading Hospital, and I know you from many years ago.
When I had black hair and a black
Yes,
mustache.
yes. And I worked on C1 when our dear Matt Kinzer was the assistant head nurse on evenings. I'm sure you remember that.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
I worked on C1
Okay.
when our dear Matt was the assistant head nurse on
Yes.
evenings. I'm
Yes,
sure
I
you
remember
remember
Matt.
him well. Anyway, both of my parents actually died from pancreatic cancer. And you remind me a lot of my dad, who was the most gracious man, who had enormous faith, and his journey between diagnosis and the end was very much like yours sounds. He was a lot older than you are and wasn't given the time that you're having. Nevertheless, he went right to that acceptance thing so quickly. And I have to just tell you that what you're giving to your wife and your kids is the greatest legacy that you could give them by the way you're handling your illness and the days that you have remaining. And I know that from experience. Like, I miss my dad every single day, but I learned so much from him my whole life, and so much from him when he knew that he had cancer and his days were numbered, just by his wisdom and, you know, living his faith and demonstrating that to us. So I'm so happy for you and for your sons that you are able to give that to them, because it's nothing could mean more, and it's so beautiful. Thank you.
You're most kind and most generous. I thank you for those comments.
Rocky, how do you stay connected to God?
How do I
Stay connected to
How
God.
do I stay connected to God? Yeah. I think He stays connected to me. You know, through prayer, I see His works every day. When I'm feeling well, when I'm feeling poor, He's always there in one way or another. When I think back of what He has given me throughout my life, the incredible blessings I've had, to be able to become educated, to have the parents I had who made it possible for me to become educated the way I was, to have lived in such wonderful health throughout my whole life, to have the friends and the people I've met through this life. God has been connected to me. You know, I haven't had a chance to try and get connected to Him. He keeps pushing me. So, yes.
You don't ever mention anger.
Oh, I've been there.
Well, you never said it though.
Yes. The question is, you never mention anger. About my diagnosis?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the anger that I've had in my life, I've regretted because it was misdirected many times. I have no anger about my diagnosis. As a physician, I know body parts break down, they deteriorate, they mutate. It's nobody's fault. As I said earlier, I had 69 and a half glorious years that many, many, many people did not have as I was practicing medicine. And I was never angry. When I was disappointed that I had only had 7 months of marriage before this diagnosis was made. And I prayed hard to God prior to getting married. I said, "Dear Lord," I said, "if you're not going to give me 5 years with Juanita, then don't let me go through this." Okay? And so when I got the diagnosis, I said, okay, I've known her for 2 years, and then this happens, and I've only been married for 7 months. I don't know when your time clock is going, God, but you either owe me 3 more years or a year and a half, 2.5 years. I think that's my way of trying to scam God, because I know I probably don't have that much time. So, why would I be angry? God didn't give me this answer.
Just because everything you read tells you work through the process. And it's usually, anger is one of the steps. It seems like, it seems normal to be angry.
It seems normal to me that we're all going to die.
Okay, and maybe because of your being a physician and that has helped you.
Oh, immensely.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I have no anger.
And that's fair, I just
Sure.
wondered whether you were glossing over that.
Sure, acceptance and faith. Acceptance and faith. There's a wonderful book I just read. Senator Michael Paik, who I've known since I was going to medical school, and he was going to law school, gave it to me a couple of weeks ago when I read it. It's called The Gift of Peace by Cardinal Joseph Bernardine, who in the 1990s had pancreatic cancer. He was the cardinal of the Archdiocese of Chicago, and he describes his, he was also falsely accused of misconduct just prior to his diagnosis by a gay person who recanted the accusations. But it's a wonderful book. It's a little book. You read it in 2 nights. The Gift of Peace by Cardinal Joseph Bernardine. And he talks about letting go, and he talks about peace with God, and he talks about many of the emotions. People who, and I hope I'm talking about all of you, people who do not have terminal disease can look, they can empathize, they can wish you well. It is truly impossible to experience the feelings that one has who actually has cancer and know that they have a finite period of time to live. And that's not a condemnation of anybody or anything. It's just a matter of saying that when you know somebody who has cancer or terminal disease, your support, your friendship, your love, your keeping in contact with them is so important to that individual. Because it's uncomfortable for people. I've seen that in my friends. Friends who love you and friends who want to be there to support you, but they are uncomfortable in dealing with your death as a cancer patient. So, if you have friends who have terminal disease, cancer, or other types of terminal disease, don't shy away from them. Don't be uncomfortable. Be warm. Treat them just as you treated them before you knew they had cancer. That's what they would want, I'm sure. And if they don't want it, as you get to this point, you have nothing to lose. They'll tell you. They'll say, go away, you bug me. You know?
Your situations in which you were watching Patrick Swayze going through, and he seemed to be in denial for much of the later period. How did you react when you were watching what he was saying, what he was doing?
Bruce is saying Patrick Swayze had pancreatic cancer. Could you all hear what he said? Patrick Swayze had pancreatic cancer and was going through that over the past several years. And he seemed to be in denial. He was going to beat this. He was going to go here. He was going to do this, and so forth and so on. What was my reaction to him? My reaction was, Patrick, I know you need to do this, and God help anybody who would try and take that away from you. if this is what you need to do, you do it. If this is what gives you comfort, do it. What did I believe? I believed he was going to die in 2 or 3 years. And he did. But he lived those years in hope. And I lived my time in preparation and in love.
Rocky, do you have regrets?
We all have regrets. I regret. You had to ask that, did you?
Sorry.
I regret some things I did throughout my life. I regret that I couldn't be a better father, even though my sons don't want to hear it. I regret I didn't meet Juanita many years ago so that I could have more time in this type of loving relationship. I regret that throughout my life, my relationship with the Lord has been firm and loose and firm, and wasn't constant. But I also am grateful that at this time in my life, even before I knew I had cancer, that I came back to the Lord, that I found a true love, that I have the relationship I have with my sons. I try not to emphasize and concentrate on my regrets. I try to concentrate on what I must do and what I have from this point on. I can't change the past and I don't know the future, but I can live in the present. And that's what I try and do, live in the present, live today, tonight. I told Bruce I'd do one of these, that's it.
Rocky, one other thing. I think that you showed compassion during your professional life. I can speak personally. My dad was a German out of the mold of your father, who was an Italian, yet they had so much in common. And I can remember when I called you, and Dad had a minor stroke, and you met us at the hospital. And of course, he told you he didn't need that bed. You needed it for a sick person. And you guided him to a very successful situation and gave him many more years of life and changed his outlook on a lot of things. And I'm sure you did that for a lot of people. And I think that's reflected in the way you're looking at things too today.
I, not always, but as often as I could, when I was with a patient, I said, okay, if I had this disease and I was this person, how would I want this doctor talking to me? I can't say that I did that 100% of the time, but I tried to do it as often as I could. And that helped me to sleep better at night. It was selfish. I felt better. Yes.
When you go to sleep at night, where do your dreams take you?
What do I dream of or think of? There are times when I lay there and cry. Juanita's asleep, she doesn't know. I say, how in the world is she going to handle this? How is she going to continue to do all that has to be done? She can't possibly do this, Lord. I need to be here with her, and yet I know I won't be. There are times that I just lay there and I say, thank you, Lord. Thank you for all you've given me. You've given me more than 99% of the people on this earth. And I'm so grateful. So, I have mixed, I have tears, I have happiness in those quiet, dark hours.
When you go to sleep.
Hours at a time. But that's not always that. That's also my bladder.
But I'm curious about, what do you dream?
I don't dream much.
Oh, really?
Really? Yeah. Very seldom do I dream.
Okay.
They say only bright people.
Right.
Are there any more questions? Please.
I just have to say, I was a nurse at the Reading Hospital. My name is Lois.
I
And
remember you, Lois.
you have been so compassionate, such a gentleman to all your patients and your colleagues. Never ever heard a bad story except of your love and compassion in going the second mile. And I think your testimony of faith, I think as Christians, our journey is a spiritual journey in life, and that God puts people in our life when we need them the most. And I just think your testimony of faith and your dignity of facing this crisis and your faith in God can be a testimony to so many people who are going through the same thing. So I know you said you were going to do this once, but maybe writing it down or making a tape or doing something like Patrick Swayze wrote a book, but just sharing your journey of faith, your Christian love with everybody you've touched in your life. You have been so compassionate and loving. It's been a gift that God has given you to share your love with your children and your grandchildren and the love of your life. And I think by sharing it with tonight, you've just shown how much of a gentleman and how compassionate you are. And given us our own faith, faith in humankind and faith in the Lord, that we're all going to have to follow this journey eventually. We may not know when or how, but you kind of lead the way and give us a light to follow. And I just want to thank you for doing that, and thank you for your love and compassion over the years to your patients and all the colleagues you've ever worked with at the hospital. Because I've never, ever heard one bad story except of your love and compassion at the hospital. So I just want to give that to you as a gift and hope that you can share your testimony with others of your faith walk. Because I think we all are on that spiritual journey. And I do believe in life after death, and that we will all be with the Lord, and we will be happy, and there will be no more suffering. And that's my Christian faith that has gotten me through so much in my own life. So thank you. Thank you for that testimony of yours. You've given us a light to follow.
Thank you, Lois. You are too generous and too kind. And know that my heart swells with love for the words that you gave me, and I appreciate it. In that regard, I understand that this session is being taped and can be made into DVDs, and if the church in any way can profit through this, hopefully all the proceeds will go to UCC for whatever you deem is the appropriate use.
Rocky, you said God didn't give you this cancer.
Absolutely.
But I believe that God knew what your plan was, and He was gracious enough in His wisdom and mercy to give you what He did, so that you didn't have to go through it alone.
I believe that with all my heart. There's no question. Juanita had some special needs at that time too, and I can fulfill those for her, but her gift to me is so much greater than my gift to her.
What a blessing this evening has been. I think your comments, Lois, are so appropriate because they're so meaningful, and it's a testimony too, Rocky. He is a blessing. He has been, and probably always will be a blessing. And we thank him so much for being here. I promise you, there'll never be a faith conversations as good as tonight's. Some of them will be pretty good from here on, but you've made it special. Thanks, Rocky.
Thank you, Bruce.
We usually have snacks, but we decided not tonight.
Yeah, especially if it's all